Good morning, Bethel, for this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. Welcome to Bethel, where you are welcome. I bring you greetings. My name is Monique Manley-Smith. I go by Mo. I am not Pastor David Rod Byman. He is on vacation today celebrating his 65th birthday. So I am glad to see you here. And those that are here for the first time, please leave your name and maybe an email address if you want to know more about us. And those that are joining us via Zoom or Facebook, if you want to leave your Facebook or you leave your email address, and if you want to know more about us, please do. We do look at that. And you are welcome to be with us. Thank you.
Good morning. So, in celebration of Black History Month and the accumulation of this month, we've gotten some things here. Here at the closest corner, we have a commissioned piece of Nichelle Nichols of Star Trek fame. It's called "Live Long and Prosper." This piece here was actually commissioned just prior to her inauguration into the Hollywood Hall of Fame. The baskets that you see are from the Gullah Geechee people of South Carolina. The baskets that they weave, they're waved with sweetgrasses, and they were traditionally, back in the days of slavery, they weave these baskets to be able to carry the crops. Now they're used just for their artistic display. They're beautiful, they're handmade, and it's a tradition that gets passed down, and they're beautiful. We also have a piece from from the Bangi region of the Central African Republic. It's butterfly wing art. They take butterfly wings and make a mosaic. And that last picture there is just a poignant person just sitting there, African American male sitting on his porch, and it's very poignant because he's proudly displaying the American flag. And I think that that's just an idea of all of us, sitting here, we're all Americans. We want to, just want the best for us. And so this blanket here is actually it was handmade from Ghana. Thank you.
And now we'll sing our opening song, and the sing song and praise, Draw the Circle Wide.
Draw the circle wide, draw it wide you stand. Let this be our song, no one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Let the dreams we dream be larger than we've ever dreamed before. Let the dream of Christ in us open every door. Draw the circle wide, draw it wide to stand. Let this be our song, no one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide.
So our scripture reading this morning comes from the book of Amos. Felt like it was very fitting for today. And it is from chapter 5, verse 24 for now. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Our contemporary reading is a poem called Fury and Faith. It's written by Amanda Gourmand. You will be told this is not a problem, not your problem. You will be told now is not the time for change to begin. told that we cannot win. But the point of protest isn't winning. It's holding fast to the promise of freedom, even when fast victory is not promised. Meaning, we cannot stand up to police if we cannot cease policing our own imagination, convincing our communities that this won't work when the work hasn't even begun, that this can wait when we've already waited 1,000 suns. By now, we understand that white supremacy and the despair it demands are as destructive as any disease. So when you're told that your rage is reactionary, remind yourself that rage is our right. It teaches us it is time to fight in the face of injustice. Not only is anger natural, but necessary, because it helps carry us to our destination. Our goal is never revenge, just restoration. Not dominance, just dignity. Not fear, just freedom, just justice. Whether we prevail is not determined by all the challenges that are present, but by all the change that is possible. And though we are unstoppable, if we ever feel we might fail, if we be fatigued and frail, when our fire can no longer be fueled by fury, we will always be fortified by this faith, found in the anthem, the vow. Black lives matter, no matter what. Black lives are worth living, worth defending, worth every struggle. We owe it to the fallen to fight, but we owe it to ourselves to never stay kneeling when the day calls us to stand. Together, we envision a land that is liberated, not lawless. We create a future that is free, not flawless. Again and again, over and over. We will stride up every mountainside, monogamous and modest. We will be protected and served by a force that is honored and honest. This is more than a protest. This is a promise. Amen.
We're going to show a video, a YouTube video that we watched during one of our R2R committee meetings. And we found that it was actually quite poignant for this time. We know that our current administration is trying to take away DEI, and we feel like to be very active during this time, you need to be grounded and have your bearing for DEI. So we're going through in our R2R the 6 building blocks for DEI. And the second section that we actually watched was the intersectionality of DEI. And so we're going to show this video, and afterwards we're going to have our panel up here that's consist of Anderson, Campbell, Nikki Manley-Smith, Deb Stewart, and Tim Moe. And they're going to give their view of it. Then we're going to pass the mic, and we would like for you to give your view or ask questions on it. But we would like for you to take the time to look at it, to really absorb it, ask questions, and give your point of view. We would like to show it right now.
As organizational leaders, working professionals, and members of a multicultural, multi-generational world, there is a lot of talk regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the why behind it. But what do these terms even mean? What are the foundational elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Navigating it, understanding it, leading it in your workplace, in your community. Well, to understand, embrace, and activate the what, the why, the how of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to me, it's essential to understand our own salient identities and to embrace and celebrate taking an identity-centered approach to our work. Further, we must approach DEI through a lens of what we call intersectionality. As the second of the 6 building blocks of DEI, identity consciousness and intersectionality opens us up to new ways of understanding the world around us. By the way, I'm Raven Solomon, founder and CEO of Raven Solomon Enterprises, your trusted diversity, equity, and inclusion education and consulting firm. As you embark on your journey of inclusive leadership or becoming an inclusive individual, I invite and challenge you to approach the work of DEI through this framework. Here at RSC, we call the 6 building blocks of DEI. Let's get started. The second building block of DEI is really about embracing identities and intersectionality. There are numerous dimensions of diversity or dimensions of identity to consider when you're talking about this concept of diversity, encompassing, let's say, gender identity, race, ethnicity, physical ability, educational attainment, socioeconomic status, and the list goes on and on. It is crucial to recognize that our individual identities, who we are not confined to just one of these single dimensions, one of these single attributes. Instead, who we are, how we identify is shaped by the intricate interplay and overlap of these attributes that collectively shape our experiences within the world and how the world experiences us. This concept is known as intersectionality. For example, when you complete, let's say, an annual tax form, we all love those, right? And other standard paperwork, we oftentimes are asked to check boxes denoting things like our marital status. The options might include single, married, widowed, head of household, etc. Each of these terms are what we call identifiers, or sometimes we call them an identity. And they describe the relationship that best reflects our status with that particular classification or grouping. As Kimberly Crenshaw, the legal activist and scholar, once said, identities are not just a relationship to self, but a relationship to history and to the world around us. What's important to understand is that the culmination of our identities impacts how we experience the world and how we engage in our workplaces and communities. It also impacts how others engage with us. We experience the world in many ways based on our racial identity, perhaps, or our ethnicity, our gender identity, our sexuality, ability, socioeconomic status, and of course, many other identifiers. Our identities inform both how we experience the world and how the world experiences us. Whether we pay attention to our identities or not, the world around us and the systems at play do. They are in many ways hyper-aware of our identities. Oppression and inequities have been created throughout history in an identity-centered way. Given that discrimination and bias are informed by identities, shouldn't our approach to dismantling these systems also center identity, but in a celebratory way? Taking an identity-conscious or identity-centered approach to allyship, inclusion, and leadership can inform how we respond to and embrace difference. Identity consciousness is about the sensitivity and acknowledgement of difference and bias, the cognizance of how we engage in systems that are counterintuitive to our comfort, and our understanding of how this comfort or the lack thereof shapes and frames cultures and spaces. In discussing identities, it's critical to note that certain identities hold power and privilege. Privilege is the inherent set of benefits that one possesses by virtue of belonging to certain socially centered groups. Said differently, privilege is when one group has something of value that is denied to others simply because of the groups they belong to, rather than because of anything they've done or failed to do. Privilege can appear both in interpersonal interactions and in organizational and systemic ways. Majority groups often experience privilege or the general benefit of the doubt. This can come in the form of racial privilege, economic privilege, and other forms of systemic behavior and outcome advantages. Similarly, privileged identities can be the ones we least consider. For instance, if you watch this video in a home where you pay the utility bills, that is privilege. Living without chronic illness or pain, or being a member of a majority religious group are also forms of privileged identities. Privilege and oppression are two key areas through which we understand intersectionality, as theorized by scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. Crenshaw states, intersectionality is a lens through which you can see where power comes and collides, where it interlocks and intersects. Intersectionality is about the convergence of dimensions of diversity that really create unique realities for subsets of people within a shared group. This convergence, again, impacts our unique experiences within systems, and our various identities impact the nuances of our own personal intersections. Understanding intersectionality impacts our relationships with things like oppression, power, marginalization, privilege very differently. When we approach diversity, equity, and inclusion through an identity-centered and intersectional lens, we can begin to celebrate differences and bridge gaps while dismantling inequities. Our communities and organizations are stronger when we celebrate differences and ensure that differences are both leveraged and accounted for. Our identities inform not only the equity and justice we seek, but also how we might show up and advocate for others. When we understand and embrace identities through an intersectional lens, we create opportunities to further call attention to and eliminate oppressive and hierarchical systems of both power and privilege. The important attention that needs to be paid to identity and intersectionality is precisely why these themes make up this second building block of DEI. Understanding the 6 building blocks of DEI allows us to reimagine the roles we can all play in achieving equity and fostering inclusion. Both individual behavior and systemic change will create the world in which we hope to both live in and leave for future generations. I hope you will join me in continuing to learn about these 6 building blocks of diversity, equity, and inclusion as we uncover the what, the why, the how of this work, i.e. discovering, embracing, and activating DEI.
First of all, when we talk about R2R, we're talking about our Respond to Racism Committee. So we get into acronyms and things like that, and we're so deep into it that I want everybody to understand what that is. So I think that's pretty clear. And as we have changed our statements and things and what we believe as a community, that's where part of this comes from. So my thoughts are, we're talking about privilege and oppression and where they come together. And I guess as being a white, cis male, I'm certainly in a place of privilege, but here's the thing that I didn't even really realize until probably the last 10 years. Maybe I did realize my privilege, but I didn't realize how much privilege that I had. There are things that I have just been able to take for granted. And so that has been very profound to me. And so when I look at this video, and she's very eloquent in how she lays it out, but there's also, it's sort of academic, those terms, right? So we're talking about all these things, and it's like this, and that, and it's almost like, in a way, you're reading a textbook. So what does this mean when we're talking about it? And I think here's what needs to happen, and this might make some people a little bit uncomfortable, but I think we're at an inflection point for quote-unquote Christianity. Are we going to be a dirty word, or are we going to be the force of change? And so I think we need to speak it, because I know over the last little bit of time, when you've seen so much oppression come from groups that I used to just be so proud to be a part of, I think we're there. And so what does that mean? So I'll just be, I know we all need to talk here, but I think what it means is we need to get uncomfortable. And so that means being more aware. And when I'm talking about that, it doesn't mean to be nasty in your confrontation, because I have a lot of anger over what's happening personally. And so I need to take that anger, or I guess we were calling it rage, in that wonderful thing. So rage actually sounds a little bit more eloquent than anger. But I think they're both sort of the same thing. But we need to get uncomfortable, and we need to stand up. So I'm amongst groups, and there are often times where things come up. And this idea of DEI. You know what? Here's the thing about that. I have a good friend from college. He is the CEO of WE. It's a marketing firm, large one, internationally. And he is going all out there. And he's saying, we're in on DEI. And he's probably risking his job. Not a big deal. He's made a lot of money, all of that. But he said, you know what? Be smarter about it. Don't say DEI. Say diversity. Who's not for diversity? Who's not for equity? Who's not for inclusion? And so when people throw those blanket things out, I'm challenging everybody, me included, to be more specific. What does it mean and how does it impact? And open your eyes to how people around you are impacted that you may have not have noticed before. Oppression, okay, privilege. And then we, as the privileged, need to reach out and extend a hand. Last thought. It's not like we're doing something like we're patting somebody on the head or being condescending. We are going to grow from this. Do you know how limited we are when we're just in this little privileged group and we don't know what's going on? And my job over the last 10 years, I've been able to be outside of that bubble. I have to every day, and I'm so thankful for that.
Thank you so much for that. That was very poignant. When you look at me, there's a few things you're going to see right off the bat. There are, you see them, I can't deny them, that they're there for the world to see. But when you're thinking about intersectionality, you also want to think about those things where it may not be so obvious. That people have biases, and you have your own biases as well. And I think that's something to be cognizant of. Whereas if, like, say, Deb, even if we were in the same group, we're in front of the same group, what they're going to think preconceived notions about you are going to be slightly different than preconceived notions about me, which will be slightly different than preconceived notions about you, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's something to be cognizant of when you're interacting with people, is to be aware of those. And I think that not just the visible ones, not just my brown skin, my slightly graying hair, my fabulous outfit. Those are all things that you're going to notice. But it's also the things that you're not going to notice. Unless I'm wearing a cross, you're not going to know outright my religion. But there are other people who have the privilege, who are underprivileged or less privileged, where their religion may not be so hidden. And so those are things that we need to be cognizant of and be aware of, and I don't think that it's thought about very much, So that's what watching the video kind of realized. Oh no, there's other things as well that could be impactful in people's impressions. So
great, thank you. So when I watched the video, it reminded me of one of the first times that I encountered the term intersectionality. And for me, it was a brand new concept. I'd done a lot of work around racism and around justice, but intersectionality was a new concept for me, and it was hard for me to understand at first. And then I have a background in education, so I started thinking of those Venn diagrams. You know those Venn diagrams where you kind of draw two overlapping circles, and you've got traits of one thing in one circle, traits of another thing in another circle, and then in the middle are the things that they share. We can think of intersectionality in the same kind of way. All of those different categories that Ms. Solomon listed off, those could be different circles, right? So your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality, your socioeconomic status, your ability, all of those, it's 8, 9, 10 different things. And you put yourself in the center. And then you label each one of those circles and write down what are the descriptors of that circle that contribute to my identity. That would be one way to start to think about intersectionality for yourself. And then if you take that a step further and you ask 2 questions of each of those circles, what does this make possible for me in the world? And what does it make impossible or at least more challenging? And you start to understand how each of those different components of your identity make you into a unique person that navigates the world in a particular way and has particular access to power and influence and privilege. And for all of my white folks out there, which is most of you, let me speak about privilege for just a second, because you probably have a negative reaction to that term because you can point to someone that you know in your life or in culture and say, I'm not privileged, that person is privileged. I don't have privilege, that doesn't sound fair. So think instead about privilege as the ability to not have to overcome certain obstacles. That's a type of privilege as well. So you may not think, oh, well, I started with kind of a loaded dice in the world, but there are things that you haven't had to navigate because of parts of your identity, whether you chose that or not. Another way to think about intersectionality, if you're not academic and nerdy like me and you don't like the Venn diagram thing, how many of you have ever played with a kaleidoscope? I love the kind of kaleidoscopes that have the little discs in front of them that you kind of spin and you see all of the colors change. Intersectionality is like a kaleidoscope where you have all of those different parts of your identity and they're spun a little bit differently for every single one of us. And so we all can understand ourselves in the world that we move through better with an intersectional understanding of our identity and naming all of those traits about us and understanding what does that make possible for me in the world and what does it make impossible or a little bit more challenging for me in the world. And then you can start to figure that out for other people as well. And then as a follower of Christ, I have to ask the question, what am I to do with that information once I have access to that? And as a follower of Christ, I think that I can look at the life of Jesus, the intersectionality of the identity of Jesus as a first century Jew, a colonized person, a single male, and understand how he used power and privilege to overcome oppression and injustice on behalf of others. So a lot of my job as a cisgender, heteronormative, white, American, upper middle class male is to move into spaces where I am welcomed and comfortable and to bring the perspectives of people who are not welcomed and not comfortable and to discomfort the comfortable spaces. So if you ask the R2R committee when we were putting this panel together, I said, I don't want to be on it. And they're like, but why not? You're so eloquent and you should be speaking every time. I'm like, because I'm a straight white male and I get to speak whenever I want to speak and people will listen to me. And so what can I do with my time here? Well, not talk about me, but talk about the work that you all have to do and to amplify voices that don't otherwise get heard. The last thing, and then I'll pass it off to my friend Deb. We used to use a phrase called giving voice to the voiceless. I don't like that. There are not voiceless people. There are people whose voices are not being heard. So rather than think that your job is to give a voice to people that don't have a voice, your job is to be like a microphone. There are voices that need to be heard, and all this microphone does is takes my voice and puts it in all those speakers so that you all can hear it better. That's your job. Your job is to be a microphone to amplify voices that aren't being heard. Deb.
That's an example of using privilege to kind of give that away, to give voice to let the voices of other people be heard. And so it's, at one point it was like, my job is to sit down, shut up, and listen. And that's one way that I can use my privilege to say, I'm not going to speak, I'm going to sit down, shut up, and listen. And I think I first came to that in hearing the voices of people who had been in St. Louis after the death of Michael Brown. And one of those women, a woman of color, shared that she was there and hearing the rage and the anger of those mostly young people that were in the streets in St. Louis. She learned the lesson of being an older woman, even a woman of color, she needed to hear their rage. She needed to hear why they were so angry and not try to immediately come up with a solution, but to allow that anger and rage to be expressed and to actually hear it. One of the things that I was struck by each time I've watched this video was, again, the sort of terminology of DEI in the last 3 months coming under attack. And I was struck again watching it today, even in the introduction of this video, when Ms. Solomon was talking about who she was and her consulting agency and the screen of the different corporate logos of the different corporations that she's come in and done a training, a seminar with. And, I kind of wanted a freeze frame of that screen, because this video is a few years old. It's like 3 years old. And to actually look at some of those companies, an example that I just heard of in the last few weeks, PepsiCo, stepping back from their DEI efforts as a corporation. Flip side, Coca-Cola going all in. Yes, we're all about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so one of the ways I can use my privilege is with my dollars. Whether that's Coca-Cola, whether that's Target, whether that's the insurance company that my health insurance comes through. I'm a customer, and I can vote not only with my feet, not only with my voice, but I can vote with my dollars. So that, again, is one way of using my privilege to let other people know that diversity, equity, and inclusion, and again, like Tim was saying, diversity? Really? You don't want diverse voices? Like, who are you not hearing from? And who are you trying to shut down their voice? One last thing that I will say, not about the video, but about our scripture passage. Go to the book of Amos, read all of chapter 5, because there's some pretty convicting language in the verses just before verse 24 that we read today about the things that we do as followers of God that are essentially what the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians talked about being just noise, clanging bells, and it's God speaking and saying, I don't want any of that. I don't want any of that. It's just noise to me. This is what you need to do instead. So I'd encourage you to go read chapter 5 of the book of Amos.
All right. Thank you. You heard our panel, so we'll love to hear from you, your thoughts on the video.
When the Orange Plague took office and all these edicts came down, executive decisions, the city council, in cohorts with the DEI, spent a whole evening, an entire evening, discussing should we change the title or not. And having the big mouth that I do, I said that's just giving them a win. As Tim said, spell it out: diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's to your comments, Deb. Get out there. Your biggest advertisement is your voice, letters to the editor, letters to the paper, letters to your congressman, everything. Because if we give them an inch, they're going to take them for proverbial mile.
The first thing when I was listening to all of this, and with this part too, is that I was reminded of some of the most shameful times in my life when I didn't give voice, and I should have. Oh, believe me, I've gone to the extreme now, so. Ideas about how to channel this rage, because I have it, in a helpful way instead of a harmful way.
You can talk to my wife because she walks me down off the ledge all the time, and she's right behind you.
I think that one of the most helpful things that we can do is to refuse to be silent in our relationships. Oftentimes, I think we look for big things that we can do. Like, what is the protest that I can do? What's the letter that I can write? The big visible action. When the thing that is going to discomfort people the most is when you refuse to let those little comments and little judgments and little asides go by unmentioned. And so when you're in relationship with people and you have family members, friends, work colleagues, the person checking you out at the store, and they make that little comment that's just a little bit racist, that's just a little bit sexist or homophobic or whatever it is, and you know it is and they know it is, the polite thing to do is to just, I'm not going to agree with it, but I'm not going to say anything. You want to channel your rage? You look at them and you say, that's inappropriate. Or you say, what do you mean by that? No, I want you to explain to me why you think it is appropriate that you just said that to me. And from one white person to another white person, you'll see a white person get whiter because the blood will drain from their face. Because there's this, as white folks, there's this sort of little like pact that we have that we can sort of tiptoe up to just crossing these lines and do so with civility and with very little recourse. As white people, we got to stop that. Like, the bounds have been drawn, and you're either on one side or you're not. And you'll hear that being silent is being complicit. There's a lot of truth to that. And it's not just silence in terms of not showing up to a protest. It's silence in all of those little conversations you have where the stakes are much personally higher for you because there's a relationship on the line for you. Whether that's a relationship with the person checking you out at the grocery store that you're gonna see next week because you're habitual and you go every week and you choose the same lane, or it's with a relative. So don't look for the big things, the big anonymous things you can do where it's parachute in and then get back out and feel good about yourself because you made a sign. Do the little micro things and refuse to let things go unchallenged in your relationships.
And when we started this, I told it a long time ago that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So don't tire yourself out at the very beginning. because then you won't want to go on. So you have to pace yourself. So that's the biggest thing you have to look at. So if you rage out at the very beginning, you won't want to keep going on. Unfortunately, for a lot of us, we have to keep going on. Some people have the luxury of starting something and not having to finish it. Some of us, we don't.
I work for OHSU, and I work for the Department of Pediatrics. A lot of the research that is being done right now are projects that were started based on the idea that we need to really work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of those grants are federally funded. And the people that I work for are trying to figure out that same thing. Do we change the name? What do we do so we can continue this work? I'm lucky I've gotten to support the vice chair of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. She's a Pacific Islander. And we have a women of color group, and I wait on them. I have that privilege of planning things for them and waiting on them. And I've heard their plight. These are highly educated, successful doctors in a system that says it is embracing DEI, and they are still oppressed. It is hard for the oppressor to create change. It's up to us, the privileged, to create that change. We have the privilege. We have the power. We have the voice. And I've learned a lot about what it might feel to live in brown skin. Learn more. Study our history. Study how privilege has been denied over and over to brown people and given over and over to white people. And I had the privilege of going to college, probably because I'm a white person. Rage is the product of over and over and over being unheard and being denied what everybody around you is being given. We have to foster relationships in our lives, not alienate people who have different ideas, but slowly and gently educate them to bring them into the circle where they can begin to see the privilege they've lived with their whole lives. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone, for participating with this panel and everything. I hope you have all learned something and gained something from this. Thank you.
So, hi again. We're going to try something, and I have faith, and I know a guy that always says grace abounds. So, we're going to, what we're going to do is we're going to do a song, and it is our special music today, but you guys are all included in this. You got to do it. So we'll start slow. We're going to have Nancy's going to be keeping a beat for us, and we're going to do our claps. It's going to come together beautifully. All right.
All right. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Lord, I'm free, free, free. Lord, I'm free. Lord, I'm free, free, free. Lord, I'm free.
There we go.
I done scream and I done talk. I done run and I done walked. But it don't matter now, 'cause I'm free. Lord, I'm free, free, free. Lord, I'm free. Lord, I'm free, free, free. Lord, I'm free. I done screamed and I done talked. I done run and I done walked. But it don't matter now, 'cause I'm free.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now we need a, whew, it's kind of hot.
And thank you for giving us your prayer that you give us to say, and we will be saying it in the New Zealand version. And it goes, Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, living God in whom is heaven, the howling of your name echo through the universe. The way of your just be followed by the people of the world. Your healing will be done by all creating beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and calm on earth and the earth in the hurts we absorb from the one another, forgive us. In times of temptations and tests, strengthen us. From trials too great to ensure, spare us. From the grips of all that is evil, fear us. For you brings in the glory of power that is love, now and forever. Amen.
Is there a slide? Oh. Let's see here. So we're going to get ready for the benediction. We're going to do the benediction just slightly different. Nobody can beat David anyway, so why even try? Today's benediction is a song, actually. It's a song called Ella's Song. It's a song that was written, Ella's Song was written by Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, a founding member of the Grammy Award-winning, African-American, all-female a cappella group, Sweet Honey and the Rock. Dr. Reagan was deeply inspired by one of the most influential women in the civil rights movement, Ella Josephine Baker. And though Baker's work was mostly behind the scenes, she is easily recognized as one of the most important African-American leaders of the 20th century. The lyrics and concept of Ella's song are taken directly from Ella Baker's quotes. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens. The struggle is eternal. The tribe increases, somebody else carries on. It's been over 50 years since Dr. Reagan tributed Ella Baker, so artfully putting her words to music, and another 10 years prior to that before Baker first spoke them. But their sentiments still ring true, especially today. So, without further ado, I present to you Ella's Song, performed by none other than Sweet Honey and the Rock.
We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Sing it with me if you like it. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my of the young who dare to run against the storm. 'Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gales, we who believe in freedom and not rest. Let me talking to you. We who believe in freedom and not rest until now. And struggling myself don't need a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. How about no man's word? We believe in freedom and not rest. Hear me talking to you. We believe in freedom and not rest until not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. We believe in freedom and not rest. Oh, we believe in freedom and not rest until it
All right, it's over to you, Chad.